have been teaching social media for about 4.5 years now. And it's funny, when I first started teaching the class, I said to people, this is your choice, whether or not to get involved in social media as a nonprofit. But today's message is very different. Today my message is, you no longer have a choice. You must get involved in social media. The question is, what type of social media is most appropriate for your organization, your internal capacity? So I hope that's part of what we will learn today. And I also want to say that I'm not a social media expert. I think anyone that tells you that they're a social media expert really doesn't know what they're doing, because social media changes on a daily basis. Something always happens, and right before I teach a class, Facebook does some drastic change to their website, and I log in to try to show you something, and they've moved it somewhere else. And so that's just a small example of why no one is truly a social media expert. But I hope what I can bring today is the cross-section between social media and nonprofits, or non-profiting organizations. And so I come to you with about 15 years in nonprofits, working as a full-time fundraiser and then as a consultant for the last 5 years. I have my own consulting firm, Milstead Consulting, that does fundraising, marketing, social media work, board development work, and then I'm also a lead consultant at Floricane, which is a regional firm covering Central Virginia that does strategic planning and organizational development. And then I really like teaching, and so I do teaching gigs here and there and all over the place. So why don't we go ahead and get started to spend your energy. Okay, so here's what we're going to do today. We're going to do a general overview. We're going to look at Facebook and Twitter. I took blogging out of this presentation just because we have a shorter amount of time, but I can dabble in it a little bit. We're going to talk about setting up your social media personality and marketing and fundraising, and then we'll end with some fun stuff. So this is just my definition. There are a million definitions out there. But this is just what I said. Social media defines internet tools that enable anyone, even private individuals, to publish or access information. It's media for the masses with a focus on small bits of information. So Beth Cantor, who I mentioned a little while ago, and you can, if you just Google her, her blog will come up. It's called Beth's Blog. She's got a really active Twitter page. She's got a very active Facebook page. If you're at all interested in sort of geeking out about nonprofit social media, she is the person to do that with. She's sort of, the genius with nonprofits. So this is what she says, and so this is the good information to give to your executive director, but I think she over-exaggerates it, but it's what's out there right now. So she says, in order to accurately listen on social media, which means being passive, just out there listening to what your supporters, what your competitors are saying 5 hours a week. To listen and participate 10 hours a week. To listen, participate, and generate buzz 10 to 15 hours. To listen, participate, generate buzz, and share your story 15 to 20 hours. And then community building and social networking. She says to do that, to do everything here, takes 20 hours a week. I think that you can fit it in about 2 hours a week pretty easily, and we'll talk about it. That's not a super robust relationship with social media, but that's sort of the bare minimum of getting it all done right now.
What's the source for that again? I'm sorry.
It's Beth Cantor. Yeah, it's on your, if you can read it.
No, I can't.
Okay. It's
Beth Cantor.
Yeah, Beth Cantor.
I can look it up.
Yep.
All right.
It's How Much Time, the blog post. It was in October of 2008. So, Drew, you mentioned that you were concerned about the reputation management of your organization dabbling in social media. What else are you guys concerned about? Why haven't you done it so far?
Negative comments.
Negative. So you're afraid of getting negative comments? Okay. Yes.
We've been on for a while, but we have to be very careful, I guess, when you're attaching pictures for copyrights or sharing stories and getting a little in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Have you guys gotten in trouble, or you're nervous about getting in trouble?
No, we've dipped our toe in a little bit, and had a few folks mention that they needed permission in order to use the pictures. So they were kind, and so we immediately got it off of there, and then went to a site where they allow pictures to be used.
Okay. Yes.
I'm afraid of the time
vacuum that it creates, and not being able, because I have a LinkedIn account, and I bet I haven't looked at it in months. And it's the follow-through thing that, who's got time for all of this? So.
Not everybody, but I think part of the key is figuring out
how to
where
make time,
where you spend your time.
and how to, maybe some kind of schedule, how to manage that, hit the.
LinkedIn is something that everyone, it's your professional resume, we'll look at it real fast. But everyone should have their LinkedIn. It's important for you as an individual, but it's also important for your organization because donors, savvy donors, volunteers, business leaders are now using LinkedIn to verify an organization. And so what they want to see when they go is that your organization has a short profile. I mean, there's nothing glitzy. It's very boring. You don't have to keep it up. You just set it up once. And that the key executives in the organization have fully developed profiles. So they're looking to see who is your executive director? How long have they been involved in housing? Where did they come from? Where did they get their degree? They want all of that information. And so LinkedIn is a place you go and you fill out and then you can leave. It's a fine.
Okay.
So there are some basics. These are the types that we're going to look at today if we have a chance. Blogs, multimedia, and that includes YouTube, Flickr, those sorts of things, Facebook, and Twitter. But before we do anything, we have to understand the basics of tagging. So who knows what a hashtag is? Okay, so when you're in Twitter, you will see things like this all over the place, which is the pound sign and then some letters. This is called a hashtag. In Facebook, they're not used. In blogging, they're used. But it's important to understand why they're useful. So if you think about it this way, when you tag something, it's like putting a file label on whatever you've done. So if you tag your blog post, it's like putting a file label on that blog post that says, this is about advocacy, this is about education, this is about change. That's the 3 points of the Virginia Housing Coalition. Or this is about Pine Street, this is about Bourbon Street, whatever the names of the streets of where your housing developments are. So however you use it, it's like labels. On Twitter, people use hashtags to sort of organize content. So for example, if we go to Twitter and we search, so anything that's blue on Twitter is searchable. And so if you click on it, Twitter performs the search for you. So I use this hashtag SMC4NP. And what it stands for is Social Media Class for Nonprofits. I made it up. There's no registry place where you have to tell people you're going to use it. You just use it. So if we click on this, you're not going to get a lot right now because I haven't taught a class in a while. But what you'll see is a list of everyone that used this. And so what these people are saying is the information that they just put on Twitter is relevant to this topic. And so this was Beth Cantor. Actually, I got her book for Christmas and I was reading it and she retweeted my message. Jim Babb took my last class, and so here he is talking about something. This is Lisa. She took my last class. So again, these are all people that were tweeting and saying that what they had was relevant to that tag. So if we look up another one, like if we look up nonprofits, what we'll get is a list of everyone that says that their message is relevant to nonprofits. And so you're going to get nonprofits from around the country, the Case Foundation. You're going to get consultants, actual nonprofits. But as you keep going down, you've got a good list of people that have said what they said right here is relevant to nonprofits. Okay? On Facebook, people don't use tags. It's just the nature of Facebook. It's how it works. But almost every other social media field they do. So they do on Pinterest, you do on blogs.
I've got a question.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I haven't tweeted before. So you have your hash mark on there. On Facebook, you hit reply, and so all those are going to be about that topic or whatever. So do you hit the person's hash mark and then tweet?
Well,
To
when
that,
we
and that's
look
how you
in
look at
depth
it?
at Twitter, I'll show you how Twitter operates. Not really.
Okay.
So the big thing to think about when you look at hashtags and tags is it's to make information easier to find. So most of us grew up with the Dewey Decimal System in the library and card catalogs. And so you would open the card catalog and you would scroll through like housing and it would say see also. And so then you would know the next one to go to. That's how you have to think about tags. The tag is to help you figure out what is that message about, what is the broader subject matter that it's relevant to. The other thing to know is that on Twitter people use tags to be funny, and so sometimes it'll be like, last night there was one going around 5-word TEDx, and so you give your TEDx talk in 5 words or less. And so you have to understand that sort of the nuance of it. But the big concept to get is that tags are used for organizing information.
But if you're the one that makes up the tag and you don't have to tell anybody else, how do they know what that's for?
They just figure it out. That's part of social media. So like nonprofits, everybody knows what that is. So every time I teach a social media class, I give this tag out. It's really just used to coordinate all of my social media classes. When I teach the class in Richmond, it's a 2-day class and they actually have to do homework. And so part of the homework is they have to set up a Twitter account and find each other. So we use the hashtag to find each other. This one is less relevant. This one is it's a teaching mechanism. But if you're using one like fundraising or nonprofits or in Richmond, the tag is RVA. And so if you want to just make sure that people know that your message is relevant to Richmond, you tag it RVA. And people have come to understand what RVA stands for. Yes?
And am I right in thinking you could put like as many hashtags as you could fit into your tweet? So
Yep.
like it would really, like you could RVA and then nonprofit and then fundraising, so you can really
Yes.
guide the person and showing them.
Yeah, and you can also write a sentence with them. So you can say,
Okay.
this is Sarah from hashtag RVA. I'm teaching about hashtag nonprofits today at the Virginia Housing Coalition, in Fredericksburg. And maybe there's a hashtag for Fredericksburg. I didn't check, but Fburg be my guess. And so you can construct it as part of your language. Yes. Did you have a question? Yep.
Yeah, I
Yes,
see it
Lisa.
on the thing here. I was just wondering about a cheat sheet for the abbreviation.
We're going to get into Twitter, yeah. Okay, so who should do social media in your office? So the first thing is somebody must do it. It is best that everyone in your office understands social media enough that they understand the value and they know how much time it takes and they have the basics of understanding of how it operates. The second thing is to hand it to an enthusiast. So just because you're the director of marketing communications does not mean you have to do the social media. If your administrative assistant or your intern plays on their phone all day long and never puts their smartphone down, they're probably the better person to do social media because they get it, they understand it, they're more used to it, they know all the nuances. So give the job of social media to the person in your office that plays on social media the most, personally. You will have a more robust social media experience as an organization if you do that. Now that's totally counterintuitive to how we think about social media and how we think about marketing and communications. But if you have spent the time to develop your social media personality, to develop your plan, and you hand that plan to an enthusiast, they will take off running versus if you force yourself to do it and you're not feeling comfortable. 3, you are becoming obsolete if you do not participate. And so, Eric Coleman in our video said, the return on investment is whether or not you will be present in 5 years. I mean, that's a little bit out there. But you are losing donors, you are losing supporters if you are not present in these areas. You don't have to be present in all of them. You don't have to have a robust experience in all of them. So you look at like the National Wildlife Federation, their social media stuff is huge. Well, they have a team of people doing it. You guys probably, I'm guessing, none of you, especially since there's some executive directors in the room, you don't have a team of people backing up your marketing and communications. So you just need to do enough that is relevant for your area. But you have to do some. Doing it is really easy, but doing it well is hard. And so part of what we're going to talk about today is if I only have time to do one thing, where should I devote my energy? Or how do I understand why I shouldn't link all of my accounts together and have every single thing I put out there cross-post? Because it's going to, basically the easy answer is it's going to annoy every social media person out there. if you do that. There are ways to get around it. There are ways to be creative. So the guy that founded Craigslist has this nonprofit now called Craig's Connect, where he looks at the social media and technological experience of different nonprofits. And so he gathered up the top 50 nonprofits in the world and had and analyzed their social media experience. And so of the top 50 nonprofits measured in income and revenue, 92% of them were on social media in some way, and it was on their homepage of their website. I think, and mine's really small, but 90% were on Facebook, 70% on Twitter, then it goes down from there to YouTube, Flickr. But I think the important thing to take from this is that the majority of the larger nonprofits are active in social media, and they're active in several different ways. Okay, so I wrote this blog post a long time ago when I first started teaching these classes, trying to help people understand to be thoughtful about figuring out their social media presence. And so I just called it your social media personality. And so I have 5 steps to figuring out what should be your social media personality. And this is not you as an individual, this is your organization. So part of keeping your brand alive and making sure that your voice is the same there as it is here. And so first is to set clear boundaries. It's important to understand, to define who you are as to who you are not. And so understanding what you will do and what you won't do on social media. So I'd give for an example, and I'm going to use them a couple of times today because I really like what they're doing right now. There's a domestic violence shelter in Richmond called Safe Harbor. And Safe Harbor, rather than tweeting or putting messages out about domestic violence, has chosen to take a positive spin on it. And so they promote healthy love. So every single thing that they do is about the promotion of healthy love. So they retweet messages about love. They talk about defining and keeping healthy relationships, but that's what they do. So what they decided was, we're not going to pepper people with information about domestic violence statistics and post messages of, people getting caught, people dying as a result of domestic violence. We're going to take a positive spin. So they were very clear about how the voice of their organization on social media. On the other side, the James House is a domestic violence and sexual assault center in the Hopewell area. They spend a majority of their time on social media talking about and highlighting when women and men have been killed as a result of domestic violence. And so that's their take on it. So again, they're very clear about here is our voice and here's what we're going to do. And so they post national and local examples of what happens when domestic violence results in death. So number 2 is to remember that it's a conversation. So you can't go on Twitter and just put out messages about how cool your organization is and your next event, because nobody's going to follow you because you're not interesting. Your organization actually has to have a personality on Twitter for people to follow it and be interested in it. And so part of that is remembering that as an organization, it's a conversation. So you need to engage with people on Twitter. You need to engage, you need to respond to their messages. You need to retweet, which we'll talk about in a minute. You need to retweet their message, which is to copy it and put it back out there and make comments about it. But it's important for you to have clearly defined what are your boundaries. And so you have to get involved in local issues that are appropriate, but not involved in local issues that aren't. And so this is sort of that internal conversation that you have as an organization around lobbying, where it's important that we take a stance on these issues because they're serious, but here are the limitations, here's stuff we can't do. And so let's say a local developer is abusing the system. You need to have thought through before that happens whether or not that's an appropriate thing for you to comment on. Does that make sense? Yep, okay. You should have no more than 3 reasons to exist. And so what I mean by that is, so the Virginia Housing Coalition is going to educate people about the issues that impact our organization. We are going to promote our events, and we are going to highlight national and local issues related to housing. So those are their 3 reasons. So if they wanted to do something that wasn't one of those 3 reasons, they probably shouldn't do it on social media. And so if you're doing too many things, then it gets cluttered and it's harder to come up with new content. But if you very clearly have spent the time to define, here's what we're going to do on social media, and of those 3 things, only one is about yourself, then it's going to be a positive experience. So you can tell the organizations that have thought through this because their accounts are, we'll look at some examples later, but they're interesting and they're fully developed versus they're just talking about themselves and their events the whole time. Nobody's gonna like their messages, nobody's gonna retweet their messages, and all of the social networks are getting smart. And so everything got really full, and what happened was, and this is specifically to Facebook, they said, just because you've liked a page probably doesn't mean you want to see it. You probably only want to see the pages that are interesting and cool. So we're going to write this very complicated algorithm that figures out of all of the pages out there, which messages are most likely to be interacted with. And then those are the only ones that we're going to show you. And so we can look at, and I'll show you today, how to go into your Facebook page, if you have one, and tell how many people are seeing actually each of your messages, and comparing that to the number of fans you have, because the greater disparity between the two tells you how Facebook views you, whether Facebook views you as interesting and relevant, or whether they view you as immaterial. You'll be able to tell. Number 4, you need to decide your follower identity. And so you'll look at, on Facebook, this is less relevant, this is more relevant to Twitter, because on Facebook, it's passive. People like your page. You're not blocking people in general, you're not accepting friends, it's just people like you and you have a new fan. On Pinterest and on Twitter, you need to figure out who you're going to follow and why. And so I always advise nonprofits when they're setting up social media accounts to spend the time to go in and figure out who are my competitors, who are my partners, who are the thought leaders, and follow all of those people first. Because if I log on and I see a Twitter account and they have like 18 followers, but they're following a whole bunch of people, and I look at their follower list and it's interesting, I'm more likely to follow them. So really it's about getting your campaign sort of up and going. And number 5 is who you are on social media channels should match who you are in real life. And so if you are a feisty advocacy organization, it's completely fine to be that voice and that person on social media. If you are conservative and safe, your organization should be conservative and safe on social media. So for Richmond area, I use the example of the Richmond Times-Dispatch, which is our newspaper. So everybody has a local newspaper. Some of them are more conservative. I would gauge that the Richmond Times-Dispatch is among the most conservative in the state, outside of the smaller local papers. And so if you look up their social media presence, it is very conservative, it is very safe, it is very fact-based. They almost never ask questions. They're just putting out links to their copy. Style Weekly is another publication in the Richmond area. It is known for investigative reporting and sort of holding people's feet to the fire and asking really provocative questions. Their social media account does the same thing, asks very provocative questions. They get these racy, multiple-hour-long conversations with individuals, but that matches who they are. So think about, as your organization, who are you? What are you doing? And whoever you are, your voice should match the same way on social media. Okay, so do the social media guys know any better? And so I put this out there because, in the beginning I said that I wasn't an expert, and that's an important point, but even the people that think they're experts aren't experts. And so this is a story so I'm suggesting that everyone gets more involved with social media when you leave today, but I'm also realistic in knowing that you need to take it slow, so don't just jump into it until you fully understand it. And so this is a tweet from a guy, and I think it's Nashville. Nashville has a relationship with FedEx like Richmond had with U-Crops. It was this brand that we loved and trusted. It was thread throughout the community. Every other event in town was the U-Crops 10K, everything was sponsored by them. It was a lovely family. Well, Nashville has the same experience with FedEx. It's like FedEx Field, the FedEx, marathon, everything like that. And so FedEx hired a social media firm out of New York to come and help them. And so this guy, James, got on the plane, and right before he got on the plane, he tweeted, "True confession, but I'm in one of those towns where I scratch my head and I say, I would die if I had to live here." Okay, so his plane, Memphis, okay, Memphis. His plane is going from New York to Memphis, and so while that happens, someone at FedEx, a social media person sees this and says, "Isn't this guy that's giving us a keynote this afternoon on our social media?" Brings it to the attention of his boss, slowly goes up the chain to the CEO. The CEO calls the account rep in New York and, reads in the riot. The account rep, who's in charge of the account, calls Mr. James Andrews and says, "As soon as you get off the plane, turn right around and book another flight and come back, you're fired." And so in the span of New York to Memphis, a social media expert made a wrong judgment call and got fired. You can look up the story, it's really funny. But the point is, whether you are being an individual on social media or whether you're being an organization, Twitter is public. Facebook, if you choose as an organization to make it public, is public. These are all long-term things that you're putting out there. So you need to be thoughtful about what you're saying. People are very forgiving if you apologize, if it was a big mistake. But this is not an example of a mistake. This is an example of bad judgment. And so in the middle of the Super Bowl, the social media person, I think it was for KitchenAid, what's that? Yeah, KitchenAid accidentally tweeted something terrible about Obama and his grandmother in the middle of the Super Bowl. And so, which is a time when everybody is on Twitter because it was a much more fun way to experience the Super Bowl than watching it. And so within seconds, they closed the account and fixed it. But essentially, he thought he was doing it personally, but he did it as KitchenAid. So KitchenAid said something negative about Obama and his grandmother in the middle of the Super Bowl. Yeah.
Was this James's personal account too? So that speaks to also to like having a social media policy.
Look at that. Next slide, policies.
No.
So in your packet, and I need a copy of it. I'll take this one. In your packet, you've got 2 different policy templates. Okay, you've got a guide and a template. They're the last 2 pages. So these are for you to use. Feel free to edit them or do anything. I have them, so if you want them, there's my contact information, my Twitter, my website, my email address. So if you want these as documents, I'd be happy to send them to you. And so let's talk about the difference between a policy and a guide. A policy is something that your organization will put in your policy manual with your HR documents typically. It's something that you should review with and then have each of your organization's employees sign. But essentially what your policy says is, here's the purpose of our social media. Here is employees when they're active on social media. Here's the scope and coverage. So really it traces back to that social media personality work. It references your organization's code of ethics. So if you have something like that. And then it talks about things that you should not do. When you're blogging, do this. You should never quote more than excerpts from someone else's work. Think about the lines between public and private. If you make a mistake, admit it. So this is a good baseline. There are millions of policies out there. I think at this point, so there's this organization in Richmond, and they're pretty big, and I love them, but they have a no social media policy at their office, so they have all of the social media sites blocked. And so that is an antiquated policy. So if that's something that you guys are doing in your organization, I would suggest that you spend the time to rethink it. Because with smartphones and everything now, like their communications director just has to get on her smartphone and do all of the social media work for the organization because they're blocked on all of the computers. So the idea that your employees are not going to be on social media is no longer a realistic expectation. They're going to get on social media during the day. You want them on social media during the day, especially if they are in charge of running your marketing, your communications. Because as they're dabbling around, they're gonna see what your competitors are doing, what your partners are doing. They're gonna see interesting information to share back with people. And so this would govern what they're doing. The social media guide says essentially, when you are on social media, here are the appropriate things that you do. So thinking through this, so this has tips, information about Facebook, information about Twitter, information about YouTube, information about Flickr, and then how they're going to gauge success. So this is a great template for you to start working from. But let's say you're going to give social media to your administrative assistant. You fill this out, you develop your robust social media personality. That should be enough information to give them the parameters to go out and start working on. Does that make sense between the two different documents? Fraser, was that what you were looking for?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is the IBM policy. IBM was one of the first organizations that encouraged their employees to blog. And it makes sense because they're a technological organization. But this is a part of their social computing guidelines, which governs people's work on social media. And their policy is online, so if you want to see it in more detail, feel free to look it up. But it says, individual interactions represent a new model, not mass communications, but masses of communicators. So they're taking the stance that it's helpful and important for their employees to be involved in social media because it goes to the point of showing them as technological thought leaders, as people that know what they're doing and stay current. And so if you switch your paradigm of, we want our employees to work 24 hours a day, all day long. When they're in their work seat, we want them to be working. To, we want them to be seen as important people within the sphere of housing, then you can see a door to open to allow them to experience social media.
Well, just one comment though, I mean, when you approach this, I think it's really important to have a good grasp on your organizational structure and the communications within the organization before you even go down this road. Because if you're too siloed in your different ways, you're not going to be able to sell this idea, which is a great idea, but until you've got a culture where everybody's kind of on board communications-wise with each other, you can do this all you want, and people are still going to tweet crazy things that you don't want them to tweet because they don't think there's anything wrong with that, because that's the way they've been operating in the non-social media world. So it's important to think about that.
I mean, anytime, any extra work that you do as an organization that crosses over into different job descriptions, it's always important to back up and have a good, fully developed organizational strategic plan, to have done some employee engagement work, and so everybody's on board with it, to done some education around these policies, because you can't just hand this to policy to everyone and say, here's our new social media policy, go have fun. You actually need to spend some time to educate the employees about, I mean, because educating your 65-year-old employee and educating your 22-year-old employee are going to be completely different. The 22-year-old needs to be reined in, the 65-year-old needs to be encouraged. And so you really need to have taken the time to do that as a staff-wide activity. And so this is just going over the PR policies, which is the social media guide. So essentially answering these questions: where should we be listening? What should we say? Who should do it? And what about internal controls? Okay, blogs. Blogs were the original part of Web 2.0. They're pretty fast to update, and they require little to no HTML knowledge. Who in this room has an organizational blog? Who wants an organizational blog? Okay. So let's look at what makes a good blog. One is compelling images and videos. It can't just be a bunch of text because people aren't going to read it. You want text, but you also it needs to be interactive. You should have links to your other social media accounts. All of your social media accounts should feed into your website and to each other. That's the most robust way to do it. So if you're out there on Facebook, then Facebook should send people who want more information about that link that you just posted to your website to read more about it, or to your blog to read the full story. So this is part of what I was talking about. Each area has a different use. And so blogs is for telling longer stories, really getting involved in storytelling, making the case for what you're doing, and giving people that have taken the time to read it a full examination of your organization. They can also be used for a more creative purpose. And so some of you that work in the low-income housing, you could come up with, as a marketing communication strategy, a fictitious blog, which would be the blog that's told from the voice of one of your clients. And so you give their daily, a day in the life of, and so you could profile a different client each time, or the blog could be one client all the way through. I've seen organizations do things like that. So that's a different use of the blog, but at the end of the day, blogs are used for storytelling. A minimum post of 1 a week. So blogs they're the more intense part of social media. And so these aren't for everyone, and you shouldn't feel like you have to do blogging. But if you do it, you need to keep it up to date. Because if I go to a blog and I see it hasn't been updated since July, I don't even read anything because I know that they're not spending the time on it. And then the last is you're interactive in creating a community. And so what that means is blogs are supposed to be back and forth, just like other social media. And so it should be that someone leaves you a comment and that you comment back to them, that you've taken the time to add them to what's called your blog roll, which essentially is like your friend list on Facebook. And so you need to go like your competitor, your partner, or your donor's blog and comment on their messages to get to drive more traffic to yours. So it's not just about putting your own stuff up there. So let's look at a couple, and this one is no longer, but this was a great example for a while. This is the Barksdale Theater blog, and it's called the Barksdale Buzz. And so the theater is now renamed the Virginia Rep. So Virginia Rep has a website, and on the website you can buy tickets, you can see how the theater is laid out, you can get information about the upcoming shows, but at the Barksdale Buzz, you get a behind-the-scenes look at what's going on. And so it was written by their managing director. He would go in, he would tell you stories about their rehearsals, he would give you an in-depth look at when they were building the show structure for something, or the choreographer was there for 6 hours the other day and how it worked. And so this was for the person that was in love with the Barksdale Theater. And so if you were in love with the Barksdale Theater, you checked here every day so that you could know every ounce of what was going on within that organization. And so what they saw was when they really got active in this, their donations went up. Because this was the place that the people that already loved them went to hear the stories that they couldn't get otherwise. That was the purpose of the blog. So if you went to check on it at any given day, it was very recent. You see here they had pictures, they had links to other information, and links to social media. So here's another good example. This is the Lewis Ginter blog. And so again, you go to the Lewis Ginter, which is a botanical garden in Richmond. So you go to the Lewis Ginter Botanical Gardens website, and you have how to rent the facility, how to take classes, how to become a member, so like an overwhelming amount of information. But if you wanted to know information about the behind the scenes, written by the children's garden director, and what she was planting in there and how she was going to talk to the 5-year-olds that were coming tomorrow about it, you would go here. And then the next day, you would have someone from the library showcasing some of their botanical art. And then the next day, the worm composting teacher would tell the story of how you do worm composting and how that links in to the Lewis Ginter. And so again, their blog is the place where you go if you're already in love with this organization, for the behind-the-scenes stories that tell the full extent to what they're doing. And so these two were both done in a system called WordPress, and we can look at it very briefly. But WordPress is just, you think of it like Word, it's the place you go to design your blog and manage your blog. This one is done in Tumblr, which is a new kind of blog engine. It's not new anymore, but Tumblr is like Twitter and Facebook and blogging all had a baby. Essentially, it's built on really small snippets of organizations, so of information. And so if your organization is highly visual or has lots of opportunities for pictures or video content or things like that, this is a great way to keep it up to date and do it. And so this is an organization I'm not actually sure where they're located. And this is their Tumblr page. So this is the blog that supports their website. Yes.
Did you say that the Barksdale one was no longer?
Yeah, I don't think the Barksdale Buzz is still operating as a blog.
Well, and that's part of my concern on the reputational front. and that
Well,
is
they're
if
not
you-
operating because they merged with another organization and rebranded. So I think they're probably going to restart the blog, but it's going to be something else.
Okay.
So
But
that's
that is
why.
one of my concerns is, you know, you travel down one path
Mhm.
in social media and it turns out to be either the wrong thing or you've done it poorly and you could be doing yourself more damage than good
Mhm.
by having pursued it in the first place.
I would say that you're not going to do yourself damage by pursuing it. You're going to do yourself damage by pursuing it and not evaluating it quickly and then making a decision for stop or go. So if you try out blogging and you say, we're going to give it 6 months. Here's the schedule we're going to follow. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's how we're going to involve all of our staff. And we're going to reevaluate it 6 months. And so at 6 months you say, this is awesome. We're spending great time here. We're seeing a return on our investment. We're going to keep going. Or we could barely keep up with the schedule. It was terrible. We're going to shut it down and turn it off. That's, as long as you set a deadline to reevaluate, it's not a big deal whether it succeeds or fails for blogging.
But I think it is important to build in either the time or the
Mhm.
capability
Yep.
of being responsive and being nimble enough to move this way or that way.
Yeah.
Because we know that within the next couple of years, there'll be all sorts of other different alternatives.
Sure, there's a new one in the last couple of months
Yeah.
called Vine about making videos and stuff. It's just taken off. So yeah, I mean, there is something new. And so I can't promise you that in 3 years Facebook's not going to go away. But what I can say is right now, it's important for you to be on Facebook and LinkedIn. Those are the two places. You need to have a presence on LinkedIn and just leave it alone. You don't need to spend a lot of time there, unless you're looking for a job and then spend a lot of time there. And Facebook, it's just like your website. It needs to be up to date. It needs to be fleshed out, and you need to have a constant presence. All of the rest of the pieces of social media, it's your decision which one or 7 are the best for your organization. So you're going to be gauging, so if you are a highly visual organization, Pinterest could be a really fun place for you to play. If you have a lot of stories and you also have good storytellers, blogging is a good place for you to play. If you are an advocacy organization, Twitter is a good place to play. And so it just depends. You need to decide which piece is right. And to the point that I made this morning about your personality, you need to be thoughtful. You need to sit down and come up with your social media plan before you even touch any of these social media pieces. And at the very end, I'll give you the components of what would be in your plan. Any other questions on blogging? That's a really high-level overview. Yes?
Yes, you said to really be engaging with blogging, you have to, allow comments and then comment back. How many hours a week do you think that would really take? Because I can see that really taking a lot of time.
So the key is that whoever's doing your social media needs to have a smartphone. So whether it's their personal smartphone or whether your organization purchases it for them, which at the end of the day is not an expensive thing. And when we think about, we used to buy, thousands of dollars of computers, everything goes down. So you buy them a $200 iPhone and you pay their $90 bill a month, and then because of that, you expect them to have a 6-hour response time. Any message gets responded to within 6 hours, or any message gets responded to within 24 hours. You need to set some of those things and say, this is the expectation. On the weekends, we want you to check it once a day, and during the week, we want you to check it 4 times a day. You set those parameters and that expectation. But the good thing about all of these, about smartphones particularly, is that they have the ability to notify you when action happens. So, I've gotten 4 messages since we've been here about people interacting with my Facebook page or my Twitter page. And so I know, I didn't pause the class to take care of it. I know it's hanging out here. So when we take a break, I'm going to go in and check this message and deal with whatever I need to. And so trying to manage social media without a smartphone is difficult. It's doable, but it's difficult. It is much easier to manage it using a smartphone, because then it's with you at all times. Fraser?
I think that also plays into your aspect of giving it to somebody who's excited about it, because, for example, for me, I was never even asked to go into social media, but I love it. And so like to think that like some people might be, like I know my friends are like, why are you checking your organization's Facebook page on like Saturday? You know, we're out shopping and like, because someone commented and I really want to comment back because I'm so excited that someone actually commented on what I posted yesterday. So I think sometimes if you just speaking to like what she said is giving it someone who's excited, they may not be as like, oh my gosh, why do I have to do this? They could be really excited about it.
Does that help answer your? Okay.
That's true.
Let's look at LinkedIn really quick. LinkedIn is known as a professional Facebook. When I pulled these stats, I can tell you when in a second, I think it was in December. There were 50 million users. A new member joins every second, and half of those people are outside of the United States. Does everyone know what LinkedIn looks like, or does everyone, who has a LinkedIn profile? Whose organization has a LinkedIn profile? Okay, so it's not hard, it's pretty easy. Here's the link. You go to learn.linkedin.com/nonprofits. Oh, sorry. And they'll show you how to make a page for your organization. And it's as simple as sort of building out, it's your About Us page on your website, essentially. You don't have a lot of interaction. There's not coding, there's not pictures. You upload your logo. It's basically just a placeholder. But then if you want, you can post information. You can identify your leaders and who they are. It can all link in so that when people go in, they can see. So if you go look at, so here's my profile, and you can see my activity, my experience, what I do, my volunteer, my skills, certifications, and if you go to the very bottom, you can see the groups that I've taken to join and then things that I'm following. So here are the companies and things that I'm following. So we can go in and look at organizational solutions. And so this is what a nonprofit organization would look like. And so you've got, you know, the basics, your website, your industry, the type, the company, if you had products, and then they sell some ad space there. But there's only 2 people following because they just set it up this week. So let's see if we can find.
Sarah, excuse me, is
Yes.
that for your consulting company or is that for Sarah?
It's for Sarah, but LinkedIn is your resume on the internet. So it's for Sarah, but it's also for my consulting company.
Okay.
Because essentially, so if I'm meeting with someone, like Becky, I looked you up before I came in today, and I looked you up before I came in today. So if I'm meeting with someone and I don't know anything about them, I go here to get information about them. When I am meeting with when I'm pitching with a new client, I go here. When I'm meeting with a donor on behalf of a nonprofit, I go here. Because what I'm gathering is, who is this person? You know, I can guess their age based on college. I can see what organizations, I can see what groups they belong to, so what they're interested in. So here you can see boards, maybe my college, marketing, training, CFRE, which is fundraising. So you get a sense of who I am. You can see it, who they're following. So I'm following GuideStar, the Frontier Project, Floricane, things like that. So GuideStars is going to be robust. So we look in here, it tells us how I'm connected to GuideStar. They're doing updates in here. Again, I said you don't need to do this, but this is what it looks like if you had, you know, sort of a developed LinkedIn page. People aren't spending a lot of time here, so don't put your energy here, but get it all set up and have it ready to go. And you as an individual should too, even if you're not looking for a job. It's part of your organization's social media presence.
Can you just put the bare minimum value for your social media presence as far as it just goes for your organization?
Facebook, LinkedIn.
Uh-huh. Or
Facebook and LinkedIn. Oh, the bare minimum?
Yeah.
Just set up that page and you just go right there and LinkedIn will walk you right through it.
Yeah, no, but I mean, can you just put in the bare minimum information? I mean, is that okay versus all the stuff you have? I mean, I just don't see the reason for me to put all that stuff about me on there.
About
Somebody
you?
else will
If you're the executive director, then yes, you should have all of that stuff. You should have a fully developed profile. I always encourage the key executives to do that. Okay, so for LinkedIn, the purpose is to make connections, to join LinkedIn groups, to connect with experts, use status updates, encourage your staff to fill out a profile, and create a company page. That's what you need to do. Okay, it's 11:30. We're going to take a quick break before we delve into Facebook.